Hello, good teachers, and welcome to Module 13. Well, we're finally here, and it's one of the most exciting modules. It's because we really get to the heart of this whole course, and that's not just literacy in the disciplines, but it's literacy in the heart. And in this unit, we're going to be looking at wide reading. And wide reading is the concept that in order for kids to move from learning to read to reading to learn, they need to read widely, lots of books, maybe 2 hours a day reading. And that only happens when you fall in love with books. For me, it happened naturally, I suppose, as a young child. I had a mother who read to me. We had books in the house. We had print around the house. We had print in the world outside. And so I was able to make the leap from language to the language of books. And of course, that's the way we think it's the most natural way for kids to learn to read, because they come to learn that reading is talk written down. They know talk, and they know that books are made up of talk, and they already know a lot about language, so they can start reading that language. Which means when you're learning to read, that you take the stories that are in your heart, that you know from nursery rhymes or favorite predictable books, and you start looking at the pages of the book and you see the words come alive that you already know, and you associate what you know in your head, in your mind, with what's on the page. Or as Frank Smith says, reading is behind the eye. But that's not what this unit's about, because this unit is what happens when we get to second grade per se, and kids move from picture books to chapter books, and they start not only reading to learn, but learning from reading. And it happens, I think, in wide reading when children can find a subject that they're crazy about. For me, as a second grader, it was Walter Farley's books about the Black Stallion. The Black Stallion Returns, Mystery of the Black Stallion. It was Franklin W. Dixon, who was fictional, by the way, written by a lot of people, but it was the Hardy Boy books. I couldn't wait till the next Hardy Boy book came out. For me, it was comic books, which I guess were the precursor to graphic novels. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, and of course the Green Lantern. And so that's why I became a lover of books. And I read so many books that I just couldn't put one down. It stays with me today. Now as an adult, I read about 2 books a week. For example, this is a new book I just picked up, by Nelson DeMille, a neighbor of mine on Long Island when I lived out in Roslyn Heights. And he works in Garden City writing these marvelous books. His new book is called The Maze, but the first book that I fell in love with his writing was one called The Charm School. It was set in the Soviet Union era, probably the 60s and the 70s during the Cold War. And in that book, Charm School, a spoiled, wealthy 20-year-old kid decides to take his Trans Am from Western Europe into behind the Iron Curtain and drive across the former Soviet Union, and he discovers some secrets there that are going to be very threatening to his life, and he has to escape the Soviet Union. So that's when I fell in love with Nelson DeMille, and that The Charm School is one of my favorite books. I think that The Maze is going to be not equally good, but very good book. I can't wait to that. But I also read nonfiction. One of the great writers of our era is James Patterson. You may know him from thrillers and so forth, but he also writes nonfiction. Here's a great book, The Last Days of John Lennon. I haven't read this yet, but I'm looking forward to it. It's got a lot of pictures and happenings, when John Lennon was living in New York City and living at the Dakota, and of course his tragic demise by a crazed shooter with a gun he shouldn't have had that happened there in front of the Dakota on the west side of Central Park in Manhattan. So I fell in love with books, and because books are my favorite pastime, I became a lifelong reader. And that's my challenge to you, good teachers, is to help develop the next generation of lifelong readers. And we do that through wide reading widely. Now, we have an interesting module because we have some videos to watch. There's a chapter in your textbook to read that is just general overview of what is reading and the reading process. But we also have a Jordan Peterson rebuttal, sort of, to the idea that do we really need to read books today? He will say yes, but he says there are other ways of getting information that traditionally have been transmitted by books. He's talking about podcasts. He's talking about TikTok videos. He's talking about a lot of ways that today's readers get information not just from books, but from other forms of books. And they are still what books are about, and that's telling stories. It's language that's passed on from one person to another. So that's really what literacy is about. It's more than just reading and writing. So I think you're going to enjoy this week. There's not a quiz this week because I'm trying to ease up on that as we get toward the end of the semester. But there is a discussion. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And so have a good module, and we'll talk at the other side. Bye-bye for now.